Hello,
Hello,
there we are.
AI
Good,
discussions. Again,
exactly. Today, again about AI, right? Still a very ongoing topic. And today we want to discuss in particular so when it comes to AI, like the question, is it even a skill? So is it a real skill? So how would the skill look like? Is it necessary? There
hmm
are these ideas in the news of big companies who say you need to have at least 30% of your time or something like that working with AI. You need to have a specific proficiency, otherwise, you can't get through the interview, those kind of things. And of course, the idea that, okay, vibe coding is pretty much debunked, I think, but how much competency do you actually need in order to work with AI inside a team effectively? So maybe talking a little bit about the junior aspects as well. So
mm,
juniors will have more problems working with AI, but they could. So when it comes to production, not so
yeah.
much about learning, but that's the overview I think from my side. So from my side, when it comes to what I want to discuss. Um,
hmm
direct question to you. When we think of AI in the modern workplace, how many companies you work with directly as a coach are actually using AI or planning to use AI in production?
All of them.
All.
Yeah. Now,
All is a
when you
lot.
say skill in using AI, do you mean prompt engineering or more you know, on the
Maybe
product
starting from top.
engineering side and trying to put AI into the systems somehow? So, to give you an example, I worked with a data client a few years ago that was trying to put AI into their system somehow. So they have a lot of features, and they were trying to figure out, okay, which of these features generates labels, which of these features generates an opinion or score of some kind. Is there something fuzzy? And they were trying to get something a human was doing with an Excel spreadsheet or with some complicated math and trying to replace it with a GPT wrapper, just so they can say they're using AI, even if it's not better than what the human was doing. Right? Just to use it as a marketing tool because and that's not the company's fault. We the consumers are silly in thinking that something that uses AI is much better than something that isn't.
Hmm.
So that's one aspect. The other aspect is I'm coaching right now a lot of people who are building GPT wrappers or are dealing with some kind of like embedding research, right? So where their inputs into their system is some kind of embedding, or the output of their system is some kind of embedding. Um, where an embedding is basically, imagine you're building a chatbot and uh, you're pre-prompting that chatbot. You can turn that pre-prompt into a bunch of vectors, then save that. Like creating your avatar, giving it a name, a profile, a color, and then saying this embedding is
Hmm.
Stacy, and Stacy answers questions about the documentation. There's a lot of that. I think that would be like the majority of like product side implementations that I'm seeing right now, at least from the people that I'm coaching. And then there's the dev side AI, which is Copilot, wishy-washy AI-like behavior, autocomplete that isn't quite GPT modeled, or agentic slash auto semi-pilot. I don't know what to call it, or product research. Just
Hmm.
just the dev doing what the dev is doing, and then opening up ChatGPT every now and then and putting like a meeting summary in there and asking them to produce a API spec from it.
Hmm.
So now we need to discuss like which one of these are like. What do you think? Like, which of these have you seen?
All as well. So I see many platforms offering their AI chatbot solutions out of the box.
hmm
So you have them everywhere right now. You can everywhere basically have your little models. You can. It's a little bit like an AI model as a service little thing that you
Yeah,
own
yeah,
GPT thing. It's not
yeah.
only OpenAI or Anthropic or something like that. You can basically have it everywhere. But that is not entirely directly what I think I mean, because that is not so much about competency. That is, so competency today, my main topic here is for the person who's actually using the AI to create something. So that is the main thing. So that of
Mm-hmm.
course happens when you do research for what, basically for your project, for your feature. You want to take a look how you want to implement this, concepts you may
Yeah.
build. You want to learn how to program. You want to learn, how to get better, to
Mm-hmm.
learn on the go. Brian Finster said that in a post some month ago. That was interesting as well. And then, of course, the execution. That is where most people argue right now regarding AI when it comes to software developers. And that is where things like vibe coding, flow coding, and traditional is actually clashing. And I think in that space, we need to talk about competency. Competency is related to skill, is related to maturity, is related to work um, in a way that you take care of what you do. Because I think one of the biggest concerns regarding AI is that AI can work or pretend it can work in a autonomous way, which is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it can do quite a lot. It's a little bit like a dog on a leash. You can unleash it and it starts to run, but it's not really the direction you were supposed that it's when it's
That's
running.
generous. I think the dog is still smarter than, at least the dog is loyal,
The dog is loyal, the AI isn't. That's true. But the basic idea behind that, from the momentum you suppose something happens, because you think you know that AI, but the AI is
Yeah.
doing different things than you might expect them to,
Yeah.
or those models or GPTs or agents or whatever you use
Yeah.
there. So one thing is the research, the other thing is the learning aspect, and the third thing is the actual execution, so code
Yeah.
generation. And my learning is you can use AI in all of these areas effectively. You can use it. But in order to do that, you need to understand them very deeply and don't fall prone to the promises like Microsoft CEOs or people do this a little bit like you can just ask something and it's magically done. That's not the case. I never saw this and I can't imagine that with the current
Yeah.
technologies.
Yeah.
And I
That's
use a lot of
dangerous.
them. What is it?
That's dangerous. Like that's kind of like buying into that kind of FOMO.
It is, especially when you build something for your future, and then you realize that
Yeah.
you can't skip the learn. So one of the competencies we need to talk about is to understand where you are, what your role is, and what AI actually is. That's the very
Mm-hmm.
first basis. The AI is a tool. It's just a tool. It's a very advanced tool. It's a very effective tool, but it's a tool. So you are still the engineer, the developer, the coder who is responsible for whatever will be committed to trunk of whatever branch you're working on. Which
Yeah.
means that you need to know what you want to have before you either start to type yourself or prompt something into the AI. No matter what you do, you need to know what you expect to have. And part of the competency should be to be able to understand the idea of small batch sizes in that moment, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't, we saw that in the last sessions where we worked with that, you can't give the AI large batches because it starts to do very weird things. It fills
Mm-hmm.
gaps which are common sense to you or other humans in your team, but it's not common sense for the AI. So it starts to do something totally unexpected. It wastes time, money, and if you don't see that because you become overwhelmed with the amount of code it's creating, so you
Yeah.
don't read it correctly, and you then create a liability in that moment you don't want to have. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a form of competency, is to understand that we are still software engineers and it's still complicated what we do. And
Yeah.
we need to still get to the point where AI, or we need to understand that AI is just a tool and it's still us who needs to define that. And let's say, getting to the definition of what you want to do is the engineering part. Actually, it's less about coding because you don't code in that moment. You plan ahead. What do I expect? What hypothesis want to set up for what want
Yeah.
I test in that iteration to give it to someone to test or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that is a first thing. So when you hear that, is that something I ask you again about personal experience? Is that type of competency in the companies you work with something you see people have already understood and practiced, or is that something you see which is a little bit neglected and people are tending towards this? I just vibe it now. Let's see what happens.
No, I don't think it's there, and I don't think it needs to be there. Also, on a side note, I just saw Prem and Michael join us in chat. Welcome. If you're here with us live, and you want to chime in into the conversation and maybe ask a question, we are watching chat. Feel free to comment. Same goes for our LinkedIn and YouTube viewers. So you asked me, is it there? Like, is that competency there, or like is it being built? You know, like from my experience, limiting myself, let's say, to now discussing code generation. I think that's the most popular thing that people are obsessing about. I think if you're I think if you're a bad developer, you're not gonna, and I'm gonna explain what I mean by that. If you're a bad developer, you're not gonna get huge benefits from AI. So you're guaranteed not to benefit from AI.
Yeah.
And depending on how stubborn you are, you're probably wasting somebody else's time in your company, even though you feel more productive or maybe neutral. So
yeah.
If you're a bad developer, right? So if you're the kind of developer that doesn't own the entire value stream, that doesn't see that you owning the entire value stream is your responsibility, right? So you go to the stakeholder, you try to understand, you say no to them, and you go to the customer and you tell them what's going on, and they tell you when you don't understand something. And everybody in between, the 10, 15 people in between who you need to work with to push out your features, you still feel responsible for the pipeline. So QA isn't somebody you hand off things to. QA is somebody you facilitate with to get a stamp of approval on your changes, and you push them out, right? So it's all a pull mechanism from you, the engineer. Right? You pull work, you say, I'm free. What do we need now, strategically speaking? What do we need to work on? What team do I need to join? Do I need to split up my team? Do I need to reform my team? If you're a kind of developer who is thinking that way, you'll have no problems. But if you're a developer who thinks that I don't own the pipeline, I have a bottleneck upstream, a bottleneck downstream, I get a handoff, and I give my handoff, you're in for a world of pain, I would say. No matter of skill included, right? Because the skill that you need to be better at using AIs are exactly the same skills you need to not be in this kind of silo. And if you feel powerless to change your organization, even if it's just 3 people around you, there won't really be any value on the table for you if you're using AI, agentic code generation or non-agentic code generation, etc.
You said something very important there. You said several sentences ago. You said that the sense of you making progress, and I saw that. I remember that from my early days when I worked with younger colleagues, that people were thinking you are measured in how quickly you get to the point where you hand off a change to a customer.
Yeah.
And not how sustainable that change actually is. So that is something especially.
So how? We call that cycle time. Let's show some respect to our viewers. You're smart enough. If you're watching this channel, this is cycle time, right? So I'm in a silo. I have a step. The time it takes in my step is cycle time, right? What the business cares about is total lead time, right? So either lead time for the change once the change is done, which is not your domain if you're using AI, and primarily what happens, how the change is being created. which you do care about if you're looking into code generation. So what the business cares about is from the point where they said, we now have time for this, let's start working on it, to the point where a customer makes a buying decision based on that decision. That's what the business cares about. If you save 3 hours coding, by whatever measure you decide that you somehow save 3 hours, but you lose, I don't know, more time discussing, more time configuring the AI, more time QAing, more time reviewing, more time rewriting, more time maintaining afterwards, which I'm not even counting in, you know, I would. The Doro report has shown us that people who reported empirically that they felt more productive when their organizations were interviewed, the organization reported that
When they use
productivity
AI.
when they use AI, their organization reported on average, in aggregate, you know, across, again, this is not a double-blind study, this is an empirical study from Google. They reported that predominantly the business said we didn't notice or it's worse. Again, it's a new technology, so of course there will be some learning curve here. But what I am seeing is that there is no drastic, magical, significant change in productivity, right? But the media is talking about it, right? So I think it's maybe worth addressing that, in that the media landscape is dominated by people who are selling AI tools.
Yeah.
Right. So the biggest AI vendors are NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google. Now JetBrains has joined the market, Anthropic, a bunch of Chinese companies I don't know how to pronounce, and Grok, let's say, one of Musk's companies. I don't know which. Right. So I wouldn't trust what they say about AI.
No.
Because they're sponsored, right? Like, I wouldn't trust a restaurant whose job is to cook delicious food if they have a hired reviewer as an employee. I wouldn't trust what that person says.
Ask a barber for a
about
haircut and you will get one, so there is no question about it, right?
Exactly.
You can always do something with your hair, right? And the example
I wouldn't.
Yeah, okay.
But there's a lot of FOMO, right? So FOMO being, I don't know, anybody from Microsoft or anybody from Google talking about how important AI is to them. Well, that's just marketing to drive sales for their AI tokens, right? So now I'm not saying that's not true. But what I am saying is that they would have to disclose that this is a sponsored opinion. This is not a review. This is not, an objective opinion. They're just doing a claim, hoping that, their stock price will go up because because AIs are expensive, and if they can sell their most expensive, freshest, sexiest product, the stock price will go up, right? So it's blatant market manipulation, and one of the arms of that market manipulation is scaring engineers into them losing their jobs if they don't learn AI, so they can sell more AI tools, and using that fear and that excuse of, hey, I fired somebody because they wouldn't learn AI, as a means to masquerade layoffs because the US is on the brink of recession again, right? So that is the market, let's say, temperature. And most media is dominated by FOMO produced by AI vendors. And they have skin in the game in benefiting if you get scared and start using Claude today. I'm not saying Claude is a bad tool, but it's a tool that you should pay for if you need it and you know how you benefit. If you're buying a tool because you're scared of missing out, that's just me saying, hey, some shitcoin on crypto just went up, you should buy it. And you're like, oh my God, yes, I should. Like, that's right. Like, that's the same thing that's happening.
Yeah. I would say that AI does have its place in software development. After what I've experienced myself, it is absolutely a future thing. but it's not the idea like just watch it at or watch the Microsoft CEO, right? He's just, basically advertising vibe coding as the thing for next year, and
Of
everyone in
course,
Microsoft should do it,
of
which
course.
is not the case. So even people at Microsoft
Yeah,
don't do that, right? And
yeah.
the reason for that
If they
is
were,
because
they would go bankrupt, and they probably tried, and they're not doing
yeah,
it
but
actively.
what do we actually see for examples out there? We see examples like they reprogram a pretty primitive computer by
Hey,
AI,
James.
which is, hey James, which is very known. They recreate Minesweeper, Pac-Mans, those kind of things.
Yeah,
Those
but we
are
need to we
extreme.
need to understand that
Yeah,
Minesweeper and Pacman are open source projects, and these
this is what I
LLMs
want to
work.
say. That's what I want
Yep.
to say, right? So it is like a very known pattern, and of course these machines are trained on those kind of things.
Yeah.
And the point is the unknown territory where we are. So we have our domains, we have our challenges, where we humans need to first of all bridge the gap. This is what you say as the value stream. We need to
Yeah.
bridge the gap to the client from the technical part, right? So we are in
Hmm.
between those worlds. We need to translate that, and for that, AI can help us. But if we believe that AI is capable of doing exactly that, so that AI is simply not understanding humans, it doesn't have a
Hmm.
sense of time, of urgency, of anything of these kind of things. So it basically cannot do this job. It is simply impossible. And just believing that, hey, just prompt an entire concept of an app won't create the app for you. And the process of engineering is a complex one. It's a
Hmm.
it's a it's a process of months and years sometimes for a software to be created, which is okay. It should be like that. And AI, if used correctly, it can help you to find the way to the best solutions, to do better research of what you should do and
Hmm.
execute more quickly if you exactly know what you want to execute. But
And
as
if
soon
you
as
have some automated means of verifying that the AI is not hallucinating, that is also automated. So
yeah,
it's one thing to review
yeah,
whether it works, but if you need to review whether it works while also reviewing, right? So when I ask it to summarize an article, I'm like, okay, cool, this is a nice article. I like it, right? So I'm reviewing it for likeness. It's like, okay, is it shaped correctly? Is it semantically correct? But then I'm like, wait, I've read the article. Where in the article was this bit, right? So
I
I,
remember
I,
there was a
I'm
post you
already,
posted. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm already trying to gauge. Okay, does it have taste? Is it passing? Does it look too AI like? Right. Same thing with like meeting summaries, right? What I like to do is I'm coaching a lot. There's a lot of private conversations, so I usually tell my clients I'm not going to record them, even for myself.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the audio recording or video recording if it's only you and me, but I'm not going to record them. I'm not going to transcribe them,
Mm-hmm.
but I will use an AI that is fuzzy, right? Because we will lose some information, and then I will summarize that, and that's what I keep. So I won't have any private conversations verbatim, but I might have some summaries, unless it was requested that it's going to be a very private conversation. That it's going to be that the nature of the conversation will be something that we would prefer not having like disclosed. Then I skip that, right? So for that use case, it's very good because it's okay for me if it hallucinates in that context because I'm only using it to remember certain things that we discussed. I'm not using it to produce some artifact that I need to hand off, right? So I also
I think
won't use
that's a
it.
part of a competency as well. So it is to know when to use AI and when we actually have a problem with privacy, because still AIs are mainly run in clouds. So there was this
Yeah,
discussion about AI is so basically SaaS will be replaced by AI. Currently, SaaS is AI. So we
yeah,
get AI in the vehicle of a SaaS product, right?
yeah,
And that's one of those things. So we are very quickly in prompting things we shouldn't prompt, or basically we aren't
yeah,
allowed to prompt those, but we still do. And I know that from so many, especially in
yeah,
Germany, so many colleagues who work in
yeah,
companies
yeah,
where it would be basically a reason to be laid off directly, immediately, without a big notice, right? But no one cares because people are
Hi, Kash.
taking a look and saying, hello, are basically taking a look and say, how about it's more productive, these kind of things. But we
Yeah.
need to develop a form of competency there that we cannot basically do everything there just because we think, hey, that's private anyway, no one sees that. That is a cognitive fallacy we have.
It's not private. They are being trained.
Private, exactly.
They're being trained. You can, in the future, you don't know how it's being trained. An AI might be attacked to extract information of this nature from it.
That's so.
Now,
yeah.
Luckily, most of it is happening at inference time, so they're not actually tracking it. For example, if I talk to the AI, it's not transcribing the conversation unless I've asked it to transcribe it in the reply, right? So it's
at least the audio is basically storing everything until you delete it, and even then you don't know exactly if it's a soft delete or a hard delete.
But I don't have access to it, right? So if I don't have access to it, my assumption is that I don't have access to it because they will privacy check it later. So the attitude that I don't have access to it, it means they didn't store it, is not correct, right? They are maybe storing it temporarily to ascertain whether they should store it. And if you're in the EU, that, like, the accountability for that decision falls in your hands, not the person deciding you wrote the story or not. Plus, there's a lot of AI tools. You know, the JetBrains AI, Junie, very weird pricing model, I have to say.
It's a very weird model in general.
It's like the pricing model is literally small, medium, large.
It is.
They don't tell you how many tokens. They don't tell you how. It's literally small, medium, large. And I'm like, what does that mean?
No, you just have a counter there, and it's just dropping, and you don't know what it means. And when
I have no idea what it means, and it looks like a cash. But I read the privacy policy, and I didn't like what I saw.
You don't like any of them.
Yeah, because they said that it's my responsibility to make sure that what I'm telling Junie, that I am responsible for whether I'm allowed to tell it something or not.
Yeah, actually, you are. And that's a part of the competence.
No, that's correct. That's correct. And by telling them, I'm empowering them to handle, process, store, and train their AI on the data that I said that I am giving them, that I have permission to give them. But I forgot what the legal term is, but I save them the trouble. If they fuck up the handling of it or the processing of it, I'm not going to sue them, which is complete gobbledygook nonsense.
Which means that in the European Union, you actually aren't allowed to use it in terms of data privacy.
Correct.
You simply are not allowed.
Because I cannot identify them for that usage, because it's not my data. It is my user's data. It's my client's data. So me and the company would have to sign an NDA where they are the party that can mess things up. So me and JetBrains would have to sign an NDA for me to be able to, use. Again, I'm sure there's probably loopholes and jurisdiction issues here. It's about, okay, well, what does it mean to be in the cloud? Well, if the data is already in the cloud, or if the data was somehow otherwise publicly made available, would that be okay? It's
data
this
privacy in the AI age will be one of the first victims. That's already the case. So people tend to take the advantage over the actual responsibility or accountability even they take for the data, right? So the same as business intelligence. So people prepare their SQL database for business intelligence research and basically create
that I like.
Sometimes
that I like.
What do you like?
An MCP and an SQL database. I played around with that. That's sexy.
And that's not exactly what I meant. It is a little.
I know, but database wise, huge opportunity. But again, it's not.
MCP servers. The entire AI idea is a great idea, but the AI age came very suddenly for the current situation, especially the more regulated Europe does have a little.
So I don't think we'll solve. Yeah. I don't think we'll solve this regulation issue anytime soon. Not to become too political about it, but the best, right now how regulatory capture happens is that the EU is this bureaucracy behemoth in the world, and the EU is essentially the strictest or second strictest. I would say that China is stricter to regulatory capture compared to the EU, but the EU is sort of commandeering, like, at least the democratic side of, if you can consider it, the meritocratic side of regulation, right? Privacy, etc., right? The cookies and everything. This is all
Cookies
yeah, cookies. The cookies, GDPR, HIPAA, even. This is all spawned from EU-led initiatives. But yes, the EU creates very good regulatory oversight at the cost of killing the local startup scene. So no startup can operate in that kind of environment, which is why the EU startup scene is almost completely dead. Like there aren't any huge AI players in the EU that would be hugely profitable and are capturing profit. Most of them are from the US and China, right? So yes, they are very good for privacy. What they're not good at is deciding how to apply those rules, right? Like they're too aggressive to startups that require some leniency, but at the same time they aren't super strict against big companies. Google breaks the rules, slap on the wrist. Twitter, X breaks the rules, slap on the wrist. Like there aren't any significant shifts in applying it. Who it affects the most is small medium businesses. That is a net negative. Same thing with crypto. Same thing with but we saw most of it in crypto and AI. And over-regulation too early will kill innovation. Now, it's good because it can fuel innovation, right? If we level the playing field and we create regulation that elicits better products, that is a good thing. But the problem is when the regulation is being funded by the companies who want the regulation to favor their company and not favor the company of their competitors, that's a problem, because then they were already too deep on like the corrupt side.
That's cartel, actually. That's
Right.
a form of cartelism. Okay,
but this is normal. This is what's happening in pharmaceuticals, in food industry, in the tobacco industry, for example, alcohol consumption, anywhere where you would have in medtech, fintech, right? Anywhere where you would want to have some kind of consumer protection, this is happening, right? So, okay, we want consumer protection for most companies, except the company that almost has a monopoly, but they were like winging it in like the Amazons, the Googles, so it won't apply to them.
I do some listener protection right now, audience protection, and go to their comments, right? Okay, James, I use Git worktree at Vibe folder and Vibe in a folder separate to what I work in. Then I WinMerge meld between what I try and what AI does, pair programming, and kind of having AI do TCR, which I never thought that'd be a good workflow, but it makes sense to AI.
TCR is very good.
Revert. Yeah,
TCR is very good. Yeah.
So we have the problem here that we can't see you anymore. But yeah, it's actually an interesting comment. So we see that people, experienced people, use different ways of actually engaging coding or engineering in general than they would without AI. And I saw that for myself as well. I do things differently when I primarily use AI, especially in the evenings when I have a little bit of time and I use the AI a little bit more than I would during the day when I'm not that fit anymore. These kind of things. I tend to work and plan way more upfront than I would do, and it is more like I have more text files, I have more README files I like to create than I would do. This is so my personal style, and that is what I see. That's very interesting. Thanks, James. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
huge fan of TCR. I think it's healthy for AI. It's even better if you use it. But if you're not going to use it, I would say it's likely you're the kind of person who works in large batches. And if you're doing large batches without TDD, I would say you're not going to do TCR for AI either, right? So again, I'm coming back to this place of AI is a tool. What tools you use, what methodologies you use, define what kind of engineer you are, and you need to decide what kind of engineer you are. The decision of how am I going to use AI is not important if you haven't made the decision of what kind of engineer you are.
What do you want to be? What do you want to be the outcome?
Yeah,
to be? Yeah,
like
that's
are
a
you
great point.
like are you doing TDD when you're in a good mood and you're not doing TDD when you're in a bad mood? Are you that kind of engineer? Are you not testing if you can somehow avoid it? Are you that kind of engineer, or are you the kind of engineer that does tests first and thinks
disciplined with a baseline or not? That's actually the core issue of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you think that you're not disciplined and you're somehow become more disciplined because the AI needs discipline, well, if you can't discipline yourself, like, well, why do you expect different results from an AI? Like that's where I'm coming from. Like I am, ironically, I went into the life coaching side before I went into, let's say, this more leadership and extreme programming coaching side years ago. I had like a life coaching training program for like 2-3 years, primarily because I saw AI was coming. And I remember when I wrote down, like, why do I want to become a life coach? I wrote down that I primarily want to work with people who are like left-brained, accountants, engineers, mathematicians, people who are like nerdy and geeky. And I understand that the future holds a lot of AI, and the things that make us more disciplined as humans are the things that will make you shine when those tools become much better. Right? So it's like how disciplined you are as an engineer will accelerate how good you are in taking advantage of an AI. But that means that you need discipline first, or inspiration to become a better engineer without the AI. But that means that you try things without the AI, test them out for yourselves, and then you test it with the AI because it has a different interface of thinking, a different interface of feedback, different interface of scope, which is most important, but also a different interface in timing. So AIs notoriously don't keep track of time. No, you do. And you need to keep track of time for them, right? So I always say that one of the most important competencies is, first of all, you need to work in small batches. And you need to hold yourself accountable to working in small batches. And then if you hold yourself accountable and you hold your work accountable, only then can you hold the AI accountable, right? I can give you a good example of a non-AI use case, which is 4-hour sprint planning in Scrum. I saw somebody today, I don't know if it was irony or incompetence or just clickbait. Both? They said, "Oh, Scrum isn't filled with meetings. Look, it's just a few meetings." And what they had is they had a weekly calendar, and they were like 2-hour meeting, like 30-minute meeting, 30-minute stand-up, 1-hour meeting on Friday, like a retro, and a 4-hour sprint planning session on Monday morning. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know, is this just, are they, are they having a laugh?
That is definitely irony. I can't imagine.
I don't know, but it
cannot be like that.
No, but the image was framed as, look, it's mostly empty. But to me, what I saw was that 4-hour meeting, right? So I'm the kind of person, right? So I'm the kind of person that if you give me a 4-hour meeting, I will go in there thinking, okay, the 4-hour meeting will save us a lot of time in building this product. If the 4-hour meeting, if 30 minutes into the 4-hour meeting, I'm thinking, this won't help me build a product faster, I'm walking out of the meeting. And that's how I'm using AI. I'm using this tool because I think it'll help me save time. If 10 minutes in, it's not saving me time, I'm walking away. Or at least I'm aborting the full context window, deleting everything and starting from scratch, and maybe giving it another try.
That's the TCR method.
As the
So
TCR
if you
method.
see it goes into the wrong direction, you revert and you just restart new.
But I need to know that it's possible. And if I lose faith in that, then I might also question whether this approach is sensible. Because I can always fall back to, I'll just do it myself. So if you want to be a vibe coder, you need to never fall back to, I'll just do it myself. Because the fallback of, I'll just do it myself, you will never learn how to use it. Now, the problem is that learning how to use it is much better. A much better use case for that is to become an AI, like GPT researcher, like a deep learning researcher, and join those teams who are actually building those models and making them more efficient. So if you're into that kind of research, into that kind of process optimization, you should probably join, OpenAI or a similar company or Anthropic and learn how you can make those more proficient. Because I can assure you, if you're trying to figure that out on your own while using the tool, you're not going to make huge leaps. They're not, you won't, right? Like they're billion-dollar companies that are trying to do that like incrementally, bit by bit. If you think the AI is not capable of giving you the answer and you'll somehow teach it, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen in an infinite amount of time. So the only thing you can do is just to scope it down, scope it down, scope it down, scope. When it fails, scope it down, fails, scope it down, fails, scope it down.
That is already the total wrong topic. If you think in that way, you don't use it as a tool. You try to use it as a cheat. So that's what vibe coding is. It's a form of cheating. So it is it's a black box, and you play a gambling session for half a year, where 3 people vibing something together, which is a black box no one can ever fix by hand anymore. And when look at Junie, right? So I don't use. So we have an active session of Junie just because we want to test it out as well, because it looked a little bit less expensive than Cloud Code. But you ask for a simple research thing, and it starts to rewrite tests. I don't know the reason why, but I asked for where in the code base is this and that happens. A little bit like that. And it came up with, I fixed this test because of that. And I never asked for that. Why do you fix tests? Of course, revert, right? I don't want to have a random test fix. So a change, or not a fix, a change, because the AI was thinking it fixes something. And this is what I don't like, because it was somehow in the context of my question. But my question was a read-only question. And I can't trust something like that and build a black box solutions where I pretend where I basically try to put my company on as a foundation. That's not what I want to do. Let's go to the next one. Akash, if to me the context window becomes more powerful in an element, it will change coding forever. Currently 1 million meters. Sorry, 1 million coding window won't perform good after 100k tokens. That is, I think there is some truth to it. So Cloud Code uses 1 million tokens per session, and then it goes into the next session. And it's already quite fast in doing that. But I realize when you have the session until the end, it becomes more fuzzy than it is in the beginning.
Yeah, it hallucinates a lot. The bigger the context window, the more it hallucinates, right? So that's not the solution. It is part of the solution. But, and this has to do actually with what James has said. So not about that crypto and regulatory capture that does a small tangent. We don't need to go back into that. But where was it? Yeah, these 2 comments. James says the folder trick of creating a branch in a new folder, then AI going to your merge tool, and you become a better coder. Or if you're a do-it-all-myself, AI slows me down, compete against AI in a separate folder, prompt it and code yourself, people who is better and faster. I think this is the wrong approach about it. I think this would be the gambling strategy. Well, let's just try it and see if it works. I'm not interested in figuring out if it's better in producing code than me, because I know it isn't. I can test it, but that's the same way as as people who say TDD is for writing regression tests, that it tests your code, right? Like that's not the point. The point isn't that it tests the code after it is written. The point is that you cannot write. It creates a scaffold where you cannot write an implementation that doesn't work. That's the point, right? So I don't want to, if I create the correct solution, I don't want an AI to tell me, yes, I also created one. That's not an interesting problem. Because, I mean, that's not an interesting alternative to my workflow. Because what I want is, I want to minimize, or how would you say, a stock market analogy would be great here, right? So I don't want a bet that is negative, 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 and then it's 10 million bucks. I don't want that, right? Because that's playing the lottery. I don't want to do that with AI. I'm not interested in that. What I want is that if I'm coding and I'm using an agent, regardless of what its response is, I want to take something of that output that is valuable, put it into my code, even if I didn't write anything, just put something into the real code base and move on and say, this was the win, we did a small improvement.
Yes.
That's how I want to work. I don't want this split screen, 3 agents competing against each other, figuring out which one's better. Like, I'm not, like, we're not there yet. We will get there. I'm sure we will get there, and it's possible we'll get there next year, right? If
Of course, that is what we need to mention. So everything we say is this month, this year, this is the current state of technology.
It's changing very fast. Yeah, it's changing very
Exactly.
rapidly.
So we hadn't had any agents a year ago. We had a little bit of ChatGPT, and everyone was just saying it's hallucinating. It is less hallucinating now, and agents are a new way of actually make it a useful thing. So for me, AI is a useful tool, but only under specific circumstances. If they use it right, if I know what I want before I do it in small batches, I need to be able to revert things. So I use the same strategy there. And I sometimes it's really gold. Like there are some of those tedious tasks where you need to change something, refactor in 50 files. It's not just an extraction. You need to really change things. There are some parameters, and AI is really good in doing those things, right? Because those are repeating pattern with variations, and it basically works through it. You can grab yourself a coffee, come back, review what it does.
Yes, but that's but that's like data manipulation, right? So they're manipulating your code as if it's data because there are patterns in it.
Yes, right? Exactly. But I really like that because it is one of the tedious stuff which drains your brain, right? So it saves money for you, which you actually can spend. Of course, I don't.
If I create an API and I create an API, I have a bunch of tests, and I say, hey, I'm refactoring something that will break the tests. Can you refactor the test for me because I'm extending a property here?
Exactly. So you don't need to repeat the same things.
Cool.
The AI is great for that. This is generative AI in its best, right?
And it's saving me time on the repetitive tasks. Yeah. But it's not in any way doing what I would consider coding.
Yeah, so for example, when you have a little bit like you do a more complex component with a lot of subcomponents in front end, now React in this case, this is what I do very often.
And you want to swap like a hierarchy or something, or like move props.
Exactly. It's or you want to just start to build it, and you just prompt it, and it shall create folders itself. It should do everything itself. It is not very good. It is better that you give you give a little bit of a scaffold for that already, then and some to-dos inside there as tags, and say here and here, this is what I meant here. This is so much more effective because the AI don't need to find ways to understand what's in your head. You just give it in that moment.
And it's not supposed to, right? So again, I don't even want to approach this conversation from like the formal perspective of the AI will replace, in the same way that James mentions, it depends on the task who is better. Convert my code to AWS Lambda from Azure Functions. AI is better. Or refactoring a bunch of code can spawn great ideas. Even though its refactor is garbage. If it's great at giving us ideas, competing is a hook with a worm. Right? So again, the task in itself is not important. So I just started my reply on the wrong order. Hang on. let me wrangle. Let me wrangle my thoughts. Any kind of AI tool is an extension of your will, let's say. Until it achieves a will of its own, everything will come at an opportunity cost. Right? So this idea of, is the AI better at converting my code than AWS Lambda from Azure functions? My immediate response to that would be, how do you know that? Right? So how do you know that it's better? Because it might create something that works, but how do you know it didn't hallucinate something into being that shouldn't be there? So
But better is a very general attribute in that moment. So better can be
I'm
faster,
playing devil's
better can be
advocate now.
better quality, right?
We can drill holes into this all day. I'm just playing devil's advocate,
Yeah.
right? So my answer here, my response here for James would not be who is better, but I'm interested in finding the barrier where I would say the AI tools are so much better that it's irresponsible to do it by hand. So the opposite would have to be true. The AI tool is so reliable that it is mandatory that a human not do it by hand. That's what I'm interested in. Right? So where are the scenarios where the AI will be better than the human by hand? Better either time-wise, right? So in Copilot agentic work, I'm finding two dominant use cases in myself, my clients, my audience. Either they want to get more scope done in the same amount of time, or they want something done without having to do it themselves in less time or the same time, right? So when I'm writing an article, I might prompt ChatGPT to give me the template for an article, and I give it like the main headings, and then we go from there. But it works best if I prompt it, okay, here's what it'll look like, these 5 chapters, and then I say fill in each chapter with like a summary of what I'm gonna write in that chapter, and reorder them in a way that makes sense according to the storytelling triangle. And then it does that, it hallucinates a bit, I correct it, I go back, I open up a new chat window with a clear context, and then I dump that output in, and then I give it a completely different prompt to start with only the first section, because I want it to not hallucinate, to understand that it knows where we're going, right? So that might be a very quick workflow for me that I can get done, in 5 minutes. But I would have been stuck in my head for 10 had I not had that tool, right? So it's very good at bridging that like writer's block, like the equivalent of writer's block in coding, where you're just staring at the screen, not quite sure where to start. It's very good at that. So that will be like the initial exploratory stage. And when I say it is very good at that. So agentic and sort of writing AIs, LLMs are very good at helping you get across the threshold from like empty page, right? So like that empty page, staring at the empty file, staring at the empty class that has no methods, staring at the empty test file. It's like, okay, now what? Or staring at the empty page, the empty spec, the empty architecture decision record. It's very good at jumping that hurdle of like getting something onto the screen that you can then mold and refine, and it will give you like an immediate idea of what to do. Similar to how templates or infographics or prompts facilitate some kind of learning experience or inspiration.
It shows the pattern. Every time you do these things, it follows a very basic pattern with nuances. It helps you to get the basic pattern so that you get quicker to the nuance and understand what you need to do in that case, right?
I've been using ChatGPT so much that unless a GPT was prompted explicitly, I can tell just by reading a text which model generated it. So I'm reading articles online, I can tell, okay, this was O4, this was Llama, this was Claude, right?
So
I can
yeah, like
immediately.
the Microsoft products, you can rent
So
it.
I can
You
I
just
can
ask
tell
Dennis.
I can tell which again the models that I do know, I can differentiate them to the degree that I can spot them in public use. I can't for code. Code, I do notice that it is not. Like we once had this discussion about when. So this would be great, right? So to put it in perspective with James's article, so AI was huge in chess, right? So there are now chess used to be that the amount of how good of a chess player you are depends on how much over the board experience you get and how good you are in preparation and how good you are in memorizing the preparation. That was the skill expression of chess. It was all memory and IQ and experience over the table. So, not getting tired, not getting nervous, not doing like any kind of like weird like discipline. Nowadays, chess is all about who has the better engine. Think of the chess engine as a more primitive LLM. So all the grandmasters are studying machine games because the machine can play a lot better than the best grandmaster. A lot better. There isn't any human that would be better than our best machines. And there won't be. So the machine is so good that all the humans are basically learning from the machine on what the correct moves are and why they're the correct moves. That's my baseline, right? Like that's what successful usage of AI looks like. Now, whether a chess engine is AI or not, that's debatable, right? But that's sort of where everybody's fiction about where AI is headed, like that's what it would look like. In that the AI would code much better than I do, and it will help teach me why that is. That's the North Star. But right now, I'm not interested in using the AI for that exact use case if I have doubts about its skill level, let's say, right? So if I know I'm an international master in chess and the engine is an amateur, I'm not gonna waste time having a lot of like philosophical debates with it on what the best move is, especially if the AI is convinced that it knows better than I do, and I'm convinced that I know better than it does. And when I ask it to play against me, it loses most of the time. Right? So if it's merit-based and I can test it, then I'm not interested in entertaining its hallucination. Or it's the amount of times that I said to ChatGPT, hey, it seems you're hallucinating this and this and this is incorrect. Please replace it with this, or I just give up and reprompt it with the hallucinations fixed, and it says, oh, I see it now. Yes, you're right. Thanks for calling it out. I'm like, I'm not interested in that conversation, right? Like at that point, I'm already wasting my time.
Because it wasn't. It's like when you do that with a human being, it's an investment into.
It's an investment, and they will learn. Yes,
exactly. The AI just say, "Oh, I understand now," and the next time I forgot.
And it doesn't. Yes. So with a human, I would do that. Exactly. With a human, I would do that. With an AI, I'm just abort, done. I'm gonna do it by hand, right? So it's more okay. You texted me. You need to go soon. Okay.
Yes. Actually, now.
James, you need to go now.
Do you want to go on? You have a role right now.
Yeah, so James mentioned something interesting. It says it pulled in libraries and didn't know was an option. It is better at knowing the breadth of what is possible. It is not better at implementing that change. Correct. Good. I like that, right? So it helps you find the right functions. It's good at using other people's code I didn't know about and idea on how to create that code. I agree, right? So anything open source, anything that it was trained on, that works very well.
In large code bases as well, you oftentimes don't own the entire code base, right?
Yeah.
And it can give you a good overview of where, for example, a separation in teams between front end and back end It can help you a lot to understand the backend better. So how is the data actually going through the backend and coming back to me without you going manual? You can do that, of course, yourself, but we have time constraints oftentimes, and it can give you an exact place, like it's going through this, this, and this, and this. Those pattern, the AI doesn't actually hallucinate a lot there because it's just repeating what it was seeing. It is pretty precise there, except Juni is just fixing tests.
But again, I have to preface this that the example James is talking about is coming from the AI vendor, right? So it is about not understanding an open source library or a closed source library from Microsoft, and the AI was trained on it. So if it's you not using a different library or framework, it will help you in discovering it. But if you now take this and say, I'm working on something as a product team, and in parallel, my platform team is building something I will need in a week so that I can integrate against it, the AI was not trained on that. And if they're doing it with AI, and I'm doing it with AI, now there's no baseline for reference. And it's possible it'll still get that same answer, but it'll hallucinate libraries that don't exist. This is what I'm seeing the most, is that it still tries to give you that experience, but it hallucinates it into being without telling, the platform team, hey, I hallucinated some APIs, it looked good, can you implement them now? As in the AI needing to have that conversation. Like, I give advice to the product team how to implement it. I hallucinated a platform. Can you please implement the platform? Right? It's like, which is also why I usually ask when I'm pair programming with somebody, I usually ask if they can turn off their AI autocomplete. Because I'm trying to have a conversation here, right? And I'm pairing with them. And every few sentences, if they stop to read what the AI spat out in the placeholder, in the Copilot autocomplete, it's super distracting because they're having a conversation with it over having a conversation with the human who is pairing with them, and it can be really annoying. And it's even more annoying if we're on two editors, split screen sharing, and both of us have different AIs running. That's just a mess. That you need to go now. I think this is a good wrap. TLDR, save your time. That would be my advice. Use the AIs, but save your time.
Use the AIs as a tool and extension for your doing, and don't let the AI do your work. Nice. It is sometimes good to code yourself. It is not always good to prompt everything. I code a lot myself. I code most of the time the tests myself, and because I want to have them right. Sometimes, at least, I write them down in the list, let them implement maybe. But there are some things I want to write myself down to manifest my will.
Yeah, and it's the baseline for TCR. It's the baseline for TCR. Then you can prompt an agent to say, well, I wrote the tests, so you keep implementing until they pass.
You can
if they
then
pass,
say,
I
don't accept that. This is not what I've asked you for. And the AI can either correct it or you revert it and write it yourself. It's depending on you there. But if you don't have that baseline, you don't define a baseline and you don't define boundaries, then you can't expect someone to stay inside boundaries if you don't define them. Okay, I need to go. Thank you very much. That was a good one. Next week,
great discussion.
What?
I have no idea. Next week, do we have the filler episode? Is it LinkedIn?
I don't know. I need to take
vertical slicing of work. All right.
That's your topic.
That's my topic.
Very much Dennis-like.
Yeah, vertical slicing. Cool.
As soon as you have vertical, horizontal, and slicing, it's probably Dennis.
Slicing. I like that. Okay. Yeah, it's work slicing. So again, another continuous deployment / trunk-based development topic. So if you're interested in TBD, TDD, we'll make it fun.
Okay, thanks everyone on Substack. Those some people there, LinkedIn, James, Akash, YouTube. Thank you very much for listening today.
Yep.
See you next week. See you next time. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
See you, Adrian. I'll do the outro. And thank you for joining us today, Adrian.
You too. Bye-bye.
It was a fun episode, and thank you for the suggestion for the topic.
Thanks as well. Goodbye.
For our viewers, thanks for joining us. I will give you some gentle elevator music to send you off into the afternoon, into the evening, into dinner. And yeah, we will see you next week, hopefully. Feel free to join us. You can always find us on YouTube on our tech journey. Adrian has recently restarted streaming on LinkedIn because he wants to stay in touch with you that way. And we're experimenting with streaming on Substack because we've found that the chat experience is slightly better, can be slightly better. It's definitely less confusing than on LinkedIn. So, James, thank you for being on the LinkedIn crew today and representing the LinkedIn crew. Our primary negative feedback to LinkedIn is that sometimes LinkedIn messages get dropped and we don't know about them without monitoring LinkedIn. So that's our main problem that we're trying to address, because it sucks, if you want to talk to us and we can't see it in the studio, it creates a lot of admin work for us to try to figure out which messages we've missed and how to get them on screen. So again, the technology is evolving, we're adjusting. We do have a content schedule. If you're not up to date, we are binging AI essentially. So we're having continuous delivery and AI interchangeably every week for until mid-June, I think. We had like a 10-week setup planned because you wanted to learn more about AI and continuous delivery and if those two kind of work together. So that's the topics for now. If you want to influence our next schedule, our next 10 weeks of how we're going to plan them, that's going to happen soon. If you want to influence it, DM us on LinkedIn, DM us on Substack. You can find Adrian on Snackable CTO. You can also find Snackable CTO content on his LinkedIn channel. He posts his shorts there, and I think he also does have a LinkedIn Pulse. And you can find me on Mentor Crews and on Crafting Tech Teams. That's all from us. Have a lovely Wednesday. Thanks for being with us. And ciao.